In this video, I'm going to show you how I took my hunk of junk 16-foot John boat and turned it from this into this. Stick around and I'll show you how I did it, send it style. Send it. Disclaimer for the haters and the trolls. I am not a professional boat builder, and I did not build this boat the way that you would have, or the way your second cousin's Uncle Fred would have done it that's been professionally building boats for 117.2 years. This is my boat, and I built it the way that I wanted to. If you don't like it, keep scrolling and go watch those girls twerk. And if you're really curious about learning how to build boats professionally, you should definitely check out the comments section of this video or any of my other John boat videos. Everyone down there is their mama's favorite boat builder, and they could probably tell you how to do it the right way. So I guess if you're still here, you want to see how I did it. Let's go. So the very first thing you're going to need to build this super awesome boat is going to be some aluminum. I bought a whole kit from tinyboatnation.net. I've got a link to them down in the description box below, as well as a coupon code. If you want to use that coupon code I have up here on the screen, you'll save yourself a little bit of money when you go buy your kit. And trust me, you're going to need to save every dime you can because aluminum is not cheap. But it is one of the best ways to do a John boat deck and an interior because you don't ever have to worry about it rotting. The next thing you're going to need is a really goofy friend to help you hold stuff, and probably some adult beverages, and also a really good sense of humor, because we're probably going to mess a whole lot of stuff up, especially if you've never done this before. So the best thing you can do is grab a friend, grab a beer, try to have some fun, and get ready to throw stuff across the shop when you screw it up, because it's going to happen. So the first thing I'm making is these side supports. This is what's going to hold up the sides of the deck and be the basis of our framing on this boat. I'm using all 16th inch angled aluminum. It's 1.5 inch by 1.5 inch angle. I've cut a bunch of slits in it about every 6 to 10 inches or so. I'm eyeballing this. This is not rocket surgery, just cutting some slits and some aluminum here. That way it'll help it bend and curve to the side of the boat. Once I actually get it up on the side of the boat and I see where I need it, I'm just going to use a big pair of channel locks and squeeze the aluminum down to the angle that I need it to be, because it's not perfectly 45 degrees. The sides of the boat are kind of angled differently. Once you get your side pieces made, you're going to need to get your trusty friend that is hopefully not wasted drunk so that they can hold these pieces in place for you while you drill a hole through the outside of your boat into that aluminum angle on the inside. Then you can use a countersink rivet and rivet this all into place. You'll see through this boat build that I'm going to be using a hand riveter only. I am not using any kind of pneumatic riveter. I'm not using one of them fancy Milwaukee electric ones. I'm doing it all by hand. Why am I doing it all by hand? Well, number one, because I'm cheap. And number two, bragging rights. Because nothing says you're a man more than being able to hang out with all your John boat to bass boat conversion buddies and laughing at them with their little electric hand riveters. You know, calling them a front fanny, and then asking them what flavor Right Claw goes best with a green pumpkin seed jig that they're using on their fancy bass boat. The pneumatic riveter and the electric one is pretty cool, makes life a lot easier, but be a man. Do it by hand. Once the side supports are in, the next thing to do is start framing everything that's going to go across the boat from side to side. I put one up here against the original deck, which I'm leaving in the boat. There's no reason for me to take it out. It's not in my way. And then I'm going to add another one just a little bit further back and test fit my hatches. I've already got these pre-made hatches. You can buy them from Tiny Boat Nation. Same place I got all the aluminum. You can get them in standard sizes that they sell, or you can get them custom made. Now, the two that I have are not standard sizes. These were custom made, and they were whoopsies. Something went wrong with them. They were not the right size, and you'll notice that my hinges are facing opposite directions. And since I don't sit down when I pee, I really don't care that my hatches are not open in the same direction. It's no big deal. I just need to be able to get to whatever I stored underneath the deck. Now, I'm test fitting these hatches with just a piece of angled aluminum, the same 16th inch aluminum that we've been using through this entire project, and I'm just using a couple of wood clamps to hold the framing in place so that I can see where exactly I need these hatches to mount, and then I'll know where to put the framing piece at. It's really important to test fit all this stuff before you start throwing rivets in. It's probably my only downside to rivets is there's only so many times that you can drill holes in it and pull a rivet out and then drill a new hole before you just run out of places to put rivets in. So grab you a couple of wood clamps or whatever kind of spring clamps you can find and try to test fit all this stuff before you rivet it in place permanently. Once I have the hatches where I want them, I can go through and frame out the rest of the deck. My deck is huge on this boat. We're going to be using it mostly for bowfishing and catfishing, so not really bass boat at all. So my deck is pretty close to being 7 foot long total. I want enough room to where 2 or 3 people can stand on front of this boat and bowfish off the sides without running into each other. Once you have the framing for your hatches done, everything else just kind of falls into place. You know where the last piece is going to go. That's where you want your deck to end, and then you just kind of fill in between wherever you think that you need more strength. For upright supports, I'm using 1 inch by 1 inch 1/8 inch wall tube. And I have cut some angled aluminum to make my own L brackets. Basically, I just rivet the L bracket into the original rib of the boat, and then other side of it, I just rivet it into the actual tube, and that gives me some upright support to help hold up this thin 16th inch aluminum angle. My boat's 48 inches wide on the bottom, and 3 upright supports along each rib was plenty enough to hold up my deck. So the kits from Tiny Boat Nation are going to come with all of the aluminum rivets that you need. It comes with both countersink and regular rivets that kind of stick up a little bit. Everywhere that I'm going to be putting decking material, I'm using the countersink rivets, and it's really simple to install. You drill a 3/16 inch hole through both of the parts that you want to rivet together. I buy those drill bits at Harbor Freight in like a 5-pack because you're going to go through quite a bit of them doing a big project like this. Once you got your hole drilled, you're going to use what they call a countersink bit. I also buy these at Harbor Freight. I'll leave a picture up here so you can see what it looks like. And basically that's going to cut out a little funnel type area in the top of the material that you're going to be riveting, and then you put your countersink rivet in and it looks nice and flush once it's riveted in place. Now this center bar that I'm putting in here is going to be the center support for both of the hatches, and then I'm going to add some upright supports underneath it to help give it some more rigidity. And I'm using those same homemade L brackets that I made out of the 16th inch aluminum, riveting them to each rib on the bottom of the floor of the boat, and then riveting them to the upright supports. I also added supports along each side of the hatches that will give me complete support all the way around the hatches and give me something to rivet the hatches into. And that way the hatches become part of the decking system, and they also add strength because the hatches are a little thicker than the material that I'm using. It's a good idea once you get this far along in the build to actually put your hatches in place, stand on them, and make sure that you're not getting an excessive amount of flex, and see if you need to add any more support somewhere in your framing system. I'm adding another little section back here to the back side of the deck, not only for support, but I eventually want to put a seat pedestal mount here as well, filling in some of this deck space with 16th inch angle to help give it some more support and make the deck a lot more strong. Moving away from the deck, we're going to start working on the floor. I am using foam in the floor, which I highly recommend. It doesn't make the boat float any better. All it does is just keep the boat afloat if you were to take on a whole bunch of water. I am personally not a fan of pour foam. It's not that I don't like it, it's just that it's messy and it's more money than I really want to spend. It's not crazy expensive, but it's not as cheap as using this pink foam board that I get. You can buy this stuff at Lowe's, Home Depot, big box store, whatever. My ribs are right at 1.5 inches tall, so I'm using 2 pieces of foam, a 1-inch piece of foam and then a 1/2 inch piece of foam. I cut them down to size to fit in between the ribs, and then I stack them on top of each other. I don't use any glue, nothing fancy like that. Just stick them down there, and then the aluminum that we're going to be putting on top of them is actually what's going to hold the foam in place. Another thing I really like about the rigid foam board, this pink foam insulation that I'm using, is if you can get it up to the height of your ribs or even just slightly above it, what you can do is you can use a thinner piece of aluminum for your flooring and not have to add as much weight to the boat. It provides some support to the aluminum and makes the boat floor feel really nice and sturdy. For the floor in this boat, I'm using 0.050 sheet aluminum, that is 0.050, and I buy it in 4-foot by 10-foot sheets, so I just cut it down to size. If you're not familiar with aluminum thicknesses, 050 aluminum is literally thinner than 16th. It's between 3/64 and 4/64. Like, it is super, super thin. If you're not here in America land, I'm sorry, you're gonna have to use Google and figure out what that is in like millimeters or whatever you guys use where you're at. So after cutting my aluminum sheet down to size, all I'm doing is just using a square and tracing out where my ribs are gonna hit it, and then I'm using an angle grinder and cutting out those little notches so they can go around each one of the ribs in the floor of my boat. Once your aluminum flooring is in the boat, it is time to start drilling and riveting. And you're gonna need a lot of rivets on each one of these ribs to hold this floor down and nice and secure. I used about 6 to 8 for each rib, which means you're going to be spending a lot of time on your knees. If you're a weakling, you might want to get you some knee pads, but just know that no one will remember your name when you pass on. I'm not about that life, and I don't spend any time on my knees. So I'm going to spend the next hour riveting all this stuff in place by hand and complaining about it the entire time. So the next step is going to be to make a panel that fits the front of this, which is actually the back of the deck. And the way I'm going to make my template, I'm going to show you how I do it. It's pretty simple. Just take some old pieces of cardboard. You cut a cardboard box up into strips like this. Get you a hot glue gun. It doesn't have to be any kind of fancy hot glue gun. Just any old regular hot glue gun will work. And basically what you do is just take your cardboard pieces, stick them in here. Do this one. There we go. So then just take some hot glue. Doesn't take a whole lot. And you take your piece of cardboard, wherever you need it at, and just hold them together for a second. Put another piece up here. I ended up getting tired of waiting for the hot glue to dry, so I just started using tape, and that held everything in place while the hot glue dries. And then on the back side of these, we'll just take a marker and mark us a flush line there so we know where to cut this. Now I can take these scissors and cut this template down to size. And there we go. Now we've got a rough template of how we need to cut this panel. So with my shiny new template, I took it out to the aluminum using a skill saw. Nothing special is needed to cut this. You can use a regular old construction wood blade. I think the one I'm using is like a 24 tooth, just rough cut, nothing fancy wood blade. It cuts through this aluminum, no problem. Once I got my panel cut, just stick it up there on the back side of the deck and start riveting it in place. For the top of the deck where I'm actually going to be standing, I'm using different thickness of aluminum. I'm using 0.090, 0.090. It's a little bit thicker. It's not quite as thick as 16th, and it'll help make the top of the deck more rigid, and it won't have as much flex on it when I'm walking on it. Doing the top of the deck is pretty much like making your own puzzle pieces. You just measure out what you need, cover all the open portions of the deck with aluminum, rivet it in place, and then you are good. Now in just a minute, you're going to see that this entire boat is now covered in turf. Don't worry about that. We're going to cover that in a whole nother video. I had to pause the build for just a little bit because I had a few events that I needed to go to, so I went ahead and turfed the floor and the deck just so that I had them for those John boat events. But I promise there will be a video all about the turf, what kind I used, and how to install it coming up very soon. Again, ignore the turf, but let's get started on building the custom catwalks that I'm going to build to go all the way down the side of the boat. I have never seen anybody build any of these before. I couldn't find any videos on YouTube, so I was completely flying blind when I tried to do this. The idea is to have a place down the side of the boat where I can mount like a cup holder, fish finder, some rod holders, some other stuff. Also have a place underneath for Freedom Seed delivery machines if I need them for, hunting, and then also some places to store fishing rods underneath the catwalks as well. So I did not film me, trying to figure out how to frame this over here because I didn't really know what in the world I was doing. And if I would have filmed it, it would have looked like a drunken newborn baby giraffe trying to ice skate. So now that I've actually built one side, I can semi-intelligently explain to you what in the world I did, and I'll show you the full build process on this other side. By far the trickiest part of building the catwalks was trying not to drill any more holes through the side of the boat for the supports. I decided that I was going to try to use the top of the ribs that go down the side of the boat to actually mount the side support. I took some of that angled aluminum that we've been using through the rest of the project, and I put it up at the very top of the ribs so that it was nice and level. And I didn't have any pieces that were long enough. This span is over 9.5 feet long, so I had to use 2 pieces. But once I got them in place, I used 2 rivets on each one to drill through the aluminum angle and into the top of the ribs on the boat. And you got to be very careful because you don't have a whole lot of room here. You don't want to drill through the side of your boat. You just want to drill into the top of those ribs. Once I got a couple of rivets installed in each one of these ribs, I was able to go through with my pair of channel locks and just slowly start bending this stuff in place. Now you got to remember there's only 2 rivets holding this stuff, and you want to keep the angle on the side of the boat the way that it is. You're just trying to bend the top down. So I had to go very slowly and do this incrementally. I think I ended up going down the boat 4 different times, just bending a little bit at a time until I got it to where I wanted it. And it is by no means flat, and it is not pretty at all, but don't worry, we're going to fix that in a minute. After the sides were installed, it was time to do the front and the back portions, and it's really easy. Just take a piece of 16th inch angle aluminum, cut it to the angle of the side of the boat, and rivet it in place. Now this one on the back, I just had to bend it a little bit with the channel lock pliers to kind of get it to the shape that I needed it. No big deal. And then I just used a couple of stainless steel screws and washers to mount it directly into the transom. Here's a little trick for figuring out what the distance of that span is by yourself. You just take 2 pieces of that 6-foot angled aluminum and put them up on top of each other and make your span, and then use a couple of spring clamps to hold it in place. That will give you the exact dimension for what I need to cut. Now for this outside piece that's going to be making this entire over 9-foot span down the side of the boat, I'm not using 16th inch. I'm actually using 1/8 inch on this one. Same size, 1.5 by 1.5 but it is an 1/8 inch thick. At the time that I made this, nobody had any lengths over 8 foot, so I had to have my buddy Frankie over at Piedmont Custom Fab weld me up some 10-foot long ones, and then I just cut them down to size, which was a little bit over 9 feet is what I needed for my boat. Now once this side piece is done, you can just lay it on top of your front and back supports and get ready to rivet it in place. I used a couple of spring clamps and just threw a few rivets in it just to hold it for now. I put a total of 3 upright supports on each side. I put one up at the very, very front next to the deck, and I used a 16th inch angle like we've been using for the rest of the build. I actually riveted this one into the back of the deck and then up into the framing for the catwalks. And then the next support back, I only used 1 piece of angled aluminum, and I actually riveted this one into the rib of the boat itself. itself. It's just a couple of rivets in the bottom and then a couple up top to tie it into my catwalk. And then same thing back here in the back, just added one support on that last rib before you get to the transom. After that, I added some lateral supports with more 16th inch angle, and I just did one for every rib in the boat. So there was a total of 7 of them, one for the front and back, and then one for each rib. And I gave them pretty even spacing, except for the one up in the front, which is, you know, a little bit longer, but that's no big deal. With that many lateral supports in there and the upright supports, this thing is plenty strong enough for you to walk around on, no problem. So our big aluminum strip over here on this side that's running the full length of the side of the boat, this one is 1/8 inch aluminum. All the rest of our framing is 16th inch aluminum. So when we go to put our cover plate over the top of this, it's not going to be level. Since we put our cross bracing underneath both these pieces, the only thing we need to do to raise this side up is to put a 16th inch piece on it. So what I've done is just cut some more 16th aluminum angle, and I'm just going to stick it right there and all the way down the side of the boat just like that. And then I'm going to rivet this in, and this will help stiffen this up some and bring us up to the appropriate level. Now on these middle sections, because they're mounted below the framing, they're going to be a full 1/8 inch too shallow. I've cut some more aluminum. This is just some more 16th inch angle that we use for the framing. These are scrap leftover pieces. They don't have to be an exact perfect size, because all we're using them for is just to fill in this little section here, so that when we mount this top plate over it and then we put a rivet in, it's not going to bow and it'll be nice and flat. So on these cross braces, what I'm going to do is I'm going to probably put 2 rivets in the front face of this, and they can just be regular rivets. They don't need to be countersunk. But up top, I'm just going to put 1 countersink rivet right here in the middle, because once we put the plate over the top that's going to cover all of this, I'm going to be riveting through the plate, through all of this framing, and I'll do 2 on each one of these, and that'll tie it all together and really stiffen this thing up. With my trusty hand riveter and a whole bunch of toxic masculinity, it is time to drill 9,000 holes, 472 countersinks, and then put in all of these freaking rivets. And thank the sweet baby Jesus for Harbor Freight. Batteries are cheap and drill bits are cheap. You're going to burn through a lot of those in a project like this. But after all the framing on the catwalk is done, it is now time to put the top plate on, and this is pretty simple. Now here's a quick tip to make a simple and easy template to cut out these top plates for your catwalks. I just use a piece of masking paper. You can get this stuff at like Lowe's or Home Depot, but it's used for like masking off baseboards and stuff when you're painting in your house. But take a big long piece, tape it down to the front edge, and then on that back side, just hold it in place. Use a razor blade and cut along that line going down the side of and that will give you an exact template to cut out on your aluminum sheeting. For sheeting on this, I am using more of the 090.090 thickness aluminum. It's the thicker of the 2 that I have, and will help make this whole catwalk system more rigid. And with the top plate cut with my trusty old skill saw, it is time to start riveting it in place, which means to drill 9,716 more holes, a whole bunch of countersinks, and install about 3 bajillion rivets by hand, because we're men. And that's what we do. Now for this rear section, we're not really building a bench here. This is just a little covered area so I can put a gas tank and batteries underneath it if I want to do that later on down the road. But the main thing for me is just to give me an area to cover where my bilge pumps are going to be and anything that I want to store back there in the back. And if you want to sit on it, great. Or if you want to stand on it, great. So we'll make it nice and sturdy. So I've cut a piece of 16th inch angled aluminum to notch out around where my transom supports are at. Using some stainless steel screws and washers and drilling this straight into the back of my wood transom. And then using another piece of angled aluminum on the front where this bench is going to go, I just rivet it into place. I held it in place with some spring clamps so I can make sure everything was nice and level. Get it installed, and then we're ready to beef it up a little bit. Not that the 16th inch by itself wouldn't hold up the weight, but I wanted to double them to make sure that this was going to be nice and sturdy. So over on the sides, I started by putting a fill panel just from the top of where the catwalk is down to the level of this rear bench, and that'll just kind of fill that little area in right there. And then I can go ahead and put a second piece of 16th inch angle right there as well, and that'll help beef up the sides. And then for the front and back, I just laid in another piece of 16th inch angle over the original pieces that I had already installed, and installed some rivets from the top. These are countersink rivets that will make this thing nice and sturdy, and if for some reason I decide to walk on this later, I won't have to worry about it bending and flexing. Now for our top plate on this, I'm not going to be riveting this in place, but I'm using .090 again, and since this is not going to be permanently mounted, it's actually going to be removable. I came back with a second piece of 090 that was cut a little bit smaller and mounted it to the inside of that panel. I used a bunch of countersink rivets to make sure that it was nice and flat, so when I put turf on the top part of this, it won't stick out. So I decided a really cheap and easy way to hold this back panel down onto that bench so it's not flopping around in the wind when I'm trailering the boat is to use bungee cords. On the underside of the panel, I have cut a couple of pieces of angled aluminum and drilled some holes into them. 2 of them are going to go actually into the panel and be riveted into place. The other one is just going to be on that 90-degree bend, and it's going to have a hole there so that I can attach my bungee cord. And then once I get it installed, the bungee cord will run from the floor up to that little hook right there, and it will give me the option to either open that panel up, or I can take the bungee cord off and then completely remove that panel if I need to get under there for some reason. And then we have our trolling motor bracket. You can buy these at tinyboatnation.net. I've got the link to them down in the description box below if you want to check those out. But they're prefab, they're already made. All you got to really do is just measure out how you want it to fit on your boat, cut it if it needs to be cut, and then just rivet it into place. So for my boat, I have this big metal front bumper on the front that also holds my light bars. So I'm going to have to notch this trolling motor bracket to go over the top of it so that I can get my trolling motor over the front of the bumper on the front of the boat. I used an angle grinder and just a simple cutoff wheel to notch out on the trolling motor bracket where it needed to go over my front bumper. Got it fitted into place and then just marked out where the overhang was on one side. Since I'm mounting my trolling motor at an angle, there was a little bit of an overhang, so I just marked that and then hack that off with the same angle grinder and cutoff wheel until it mounts flush to the front of the boat. Now, before mounting this trolling motor bracket permanently, I need to go through and get all of this bare aluminum to not be bare aluminum anymore. So on my boat, I have used a lot of truck bed liner on the trim and on the bumper and things like that, so I'm going to carry that theme over to the rest of my framing. I gave everything a really good sanding with some 80 grit sandpaper on my random orbital sander, really good cleaning with some wax and grease remover, and then got to rolling on my bed liner. I did a total of 2 coats, and the bed liner I'm using on this one is Rust-Oleum brand bed liner that you can buy like pretty much anywhere. Everybody sells it. The thing I like most about the bed liner is I can go and touch it up if I scratch it or get some stains on it, or if it gets messed up for whatever reason. Just open up the can, roll on a little bit more, and you'll never even know that there was anything wrong. Once that bed liner's been given a day to dry, I can go ahead and install my trolling motor bracket, and the install process is really easy. It comes with this little adjustable L bracket so that you can make it for the height of your boat to go up and over the edge of your boat, or if you have a bumper like me, it's just really universal. Take that L bracket, figure out where you want it, mark it, and drill it and rivet it into the deck of your boat, and then just use some bolts and lock washers, and that will permanently secure the L bracket from your deck to the trolling motor bracket itself. And then to secure the front part of the trolling motor bracket down, you can do this a bunch of different ways. Some people use self-tapping screws. You can rivet it. If you want to throw some bolts through it, you can. Whatever method you decide to use, just make sure it's secure. I have this big bumper on the front of my boat, so I'm just going to throw some countersink rivets in it and straight into the front bumper, and it will be nice and secure, and then I can go ahead and mount my trolling motor straight to that. Aside from turf, the last thing to finish up this build is I put one trim piece just to kind of cover up the edge of the turf here at the end of the deck, and I just used a piece of 16th inch angled aluminum, sanded it down, put some bed liner on it, and then I'm just going to rivet it into place. That'll give me a nice little edge right there, so if I ever kind of bump it too hard, I won't mess up my turf job, and I think it kind of closes it off and gives it a nice look. Now, with this being a real manly boat and not a glitter-covered bass boat, I don't need any of those fancy latches and stuff that go in the hatches on the front of the boat. For me, I'm just going to drill a hole, throw some paracord in there, tie a knot in it, and that'll give me a nice little handle to open and close these, and it kind of looks sleek. I'm not really worried about getting water inside the hatches because this is a boat, not a submarine. I don't put anything inside the hatches that I don't plan on eventually getting wet. I also really like having only 2 hatches in this boat instead of 96 like a bass boat does. I don't need a day hatch and a shallow stow hatch and a deep stow hatch and a lunchbox hatch and a cooler hatch and a hatch for my man purse, a hatch for my tampons, a hatch for my Starbucks coffee, a hatch for my chapstick, and then another hatch that's hidden inside of one of the other hatches to hide my pink trick worms. I've just got 2 giant hatches. One hatch on the left side that can get to all the stuff under the deck on the left side of the boat, and then another giant hatch on the right side that'll get to all the stuff on the right side of the boat. And all that space under my deck is big and wide open, so I have plenty of space to store larger objects if I want. you know, like a body or something. Out of this whole boat build, the only thing that I forgot to film was the installation of the grab bar, but it was a pretty easy install. Just put it in the floor, center it up, drill some holes, and put some rivets in it. Not a big deal at all. Now, this grab bar is a double grab bar. You can buy it from Beaver Dam Mud Runners. I'll have a link to it down in the description box below if you want to check it out. They also make a single one that's like a T-handle, so it's just one post that comes up and then has a T-handle on top, and they're completely adjustable. You can move them forward, back, up and down, you know, raise the height or lower it if you need to, and then it actually folds down or can be completely removable if you want it to. Now, normally they come either green or black powder coated. I am not about that life. I wanted mine to match, so I took it all apart, painted it flat black, and now it matches my boat. Overall, I really like it, highly recommend it. I think it's a great addition to any boat if you want to run a mud motor and stand up while you're driving. A Send It John Boats video would not be complete without some time in the Haters Corner. I've got my hater raid, so here we go. If you're not familiar with the Haters Corner, what we like to do at the end of every video is stand in a corner and see who was the most butthurt in the comments over the last couple of videos. And because we know people on the interwebs are super sensitive, we don't use their real names, we just call them Scooter. Our first Scooter commented over on my float pod video. He writes, completely unnecessary. Scooter, are you at a loss for words, or did you just use all of the ones you had in your vocabulary? You know, scooters like this is the reason that we are one day going to have directions on the side of a pineapple at the grocery store that says, do not use this as a butt plug. I mean, really, Scooter, a glow stick has a brighter future than you and would probably last longer in bed. Our next two scooters actually called themselves out in my waterproof your LED light bar video that I recently posted. The first scooter says, I'll be a Scooter. Alabama is coming for LSU. Roll Tide. And then another Scooter jumped in and put in another RT, which RT is short for Roll Tide, if you didn't know. And also, if you didn't know, you can't spell retard without RT, so it's all good, though. I ain't sweating it. LSU is soon going to be making a comeback. Every time we get a new coach, it takes us a year or two to get back in the swing of things, and then we get another national championship. And then we suck for a few years, they fire that coach, then we get another coach, and then we get another national championship. Just kind of how it goes. Our next Scooter said, I hope you guys are sitting down for this one. Our next Scooter says, I wouldn't buy nothing Mudskipper or Swamp Runner. They are both actually business partners, and the two companies in Thailand are also brothers. Oh, and Mr. Dobbs is a DEA agent. I'm sure Campbell is one too. His wife is British, like all the DEA agents down there, have connection to the Ruck in Ireland for some reason. Also, the Ruck were the first police first in British Palestine. Beaver Dam is probably the same. You know, Scooter, the Purple Camel can only transform into a flathead screwdriver on the nights that the moon turns into a square, but it has to be the third leap year, and you can't eat tiramisu those days. It'll make your feet swell, and the aliens won't wear hats. I mean, I don't know if Scooter, like, snorted a pixie stick or something, or if he ran out of his medication and now he's seeing black helicopters, but I have a lot of questions. And last but not least, our honorable mention for the week. I posted a little short clip video of the Predator 670 motor running not too long ago. And for those of y'all who do not know, this motor has been nothing but problems since I bought it. I've caught it on fire a couple times. It has died every time I've taken it out and actually got it running, and I've had to paddle back. It's just been a disaster. So I finally got it running. I posted a little short video of it. As Scooter comments on the video, he wrote me a poem. Scooter's poem says, that's a bunch better because it's much wetter. No motor's the same once it's been aflame. This one's running fast, trying to escape its past. Props on rocks could not bend it. Quick down the river, let's send it. I want to know how long Scooter sat on the toilet at work getting paid so he could come up with his stupid poem, which was actually really funny. I enjoyed it. You guys absolutely crack me up, and you're mildly retarded like me. I love it. All right, quick update for the non-scooters and the people who actually like this channel. I want to keep you guys more updated about what's going on here with the channel and the boat builds and stuff that is coming up in the future, and I also want to hear you guys' advice on stuff. So I'm going to be making some new videos that are going to be, you know, kind of asking, you know, what you guys think about certain things and keeping you updated with the channel, but I'm not going to be posting them here. I'm going to be posting them over on the Tin Can Crew channel. If you're not following us over there, you need to be. Go over there, hit the subscribe button. I'll leave a link to the Tin Can Crew channel down in the description box below for you guys who can't find it, or I'll have a little click card up here. You can go there and find it as well. Also, we had our first live Q&A the other night, and it turned out really good. A lot of people showed up, and a lot of people had a lot of fun. If you are interested in seeing me do more live Q&As, like maybe we'll think about doing it once a month or something like that, let me know what days work best for you guys down in the comments section below. Now, we're going to roll those bloopers here for you in just a second, but first let us take a moment and always remember, money can't buy you happiness, but it can buy you a boat. Bye, guys. That's a bunch better because it's much... Why can't I get through that? Oh, I got such a dirty brain. What the hell is wrong with me? Now, we'll roll those bloopers here for you in roll a blue. I wouldn't buy nothing Mud Skipper or Swamp Runner, ... Hell, I wouldn't eat. I mean, Mud Skipper's not that bad. Swamp Runner people are kind of weird, but whatever. I'm sure Campbell is one too. Campbell was the cop dude from Peaky Blinders. Yeah, he was a freaking cop. Oh my God, ADHD. Why am I talking about never mind. These comments are legit making me crazy. Like all the DEA agents down here have connection to the ruck in Ireland. Hell is the ruck? Where's my Google? What is ruck? If you're not familiar with a Hater's Corner, what we likes to do, what we likes to do, what is wrong with me?